Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart. The Lord's given me a message for today, and it's called Rest and Laziness. This is kind of going off a lot what Ron is talking about 2 weeks ago at our young adult Bible study, The Stand. Really good message, and it inspired me to write this message and kind of focus a little bit in on laziness. I was going to have a video for you today, but I was too lazy and too much of a procrastinator, and I didn't have it. So that proves my point that I need to work on this too. So it's not just you guys that I'm pointing fingers at by any means. Look, this is like me as much as it is anybody else. So let me start with a question for those of you who are here. How would you define the term rest? What do you think of when you think of rest? By raise of hands. Like, Hallie, what do you think of when you think rest? Sleep. Yes. This is going to be the challenge today. We're going to look at that definition of rest that you guys have, and we're going to redefine what rest really means, at least from a biblical perspective. So let's talk about the rest that you guys are talking about first, because this is a necessary part of your life. Don't get me wrong. I'm not up here and telling you that rest is evil, that God forbids rest. It's actually the exact opposite, and we're going to see why in a minute. But let's talk about the disciples. Our main text today is going to be in Mark chapter 6, and this is showing the disciples after this huge ministry tour. And these guys were out, the Lord equipped them. So the disciples following Jesus were guys like us, and they were humans like us. They were prone to getting sleepy. They were prone to getting hangry when they didn't eat. And we're going to be picking up in a place today where they were going hard for days. They were going hard, and they were expecting a day to sleep. Because after a few days of going hard, all we want is just a day to rest, to have sleep, to eat, to be completely away from people and just rest, right? When I think of rest, I'm thinking away from people. Get me away. But we're going to see something a little bit different today in the example of Jesus. So let's turn to Mark 6. As we're beginning, please just think of this story as a story you've never heard before from the Bible. Totally disregard that at the top it says the feeding of the 5,000. You guys have heard this story so many times, I want to give you a fresh take on it. Every time I read the Bible, or at least most of the time, I see something I've never seen before. And I want to challenge you guys as well to do that. To see something a little bit different, to kind of see somebody else's perspective. And the perspective we're going to be looking at today is the perspective of the disciples. Not necessarily the miracle, not necessarily Jesus, but we're going to be looking at the disciples today. So Jesus is promising rest for a while here. Let's read the passage, starting at verse 30 in Mark 6. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all that they had done and taught. Then Jesus says, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. Think about that. Not eating for a few days is rough. I would be a little bit grouchy at that point. So at this point, what Jesus is basically saying here is time to get some rest. So they left by boat for a quiet place. Not the movie A Quiet Place. A quiet place. Where they could be alone. This sounds so promising, so awesome. Being alone with Jesus, there probably was nothing like that. Just being in his presence. He was such a real dude. He was the Son of God, for crying out loud. So after a big, rewarding ministry tour, they were exhausted, as you could probably tell. The master was promising rest and food, which to them felt like a nice kind of gorge yourself, kind of all-you-can-eat buffet, and then taking a whole 2-day nap. Because when I think of rest, I just want to eat as much as possible and then pass out for 2 days straight. Because I'm done. I'm done. So this is what they were thinking. The whole kind of food coma sort of mentality is I'm going to detox, we're going to disconnect here. Maybe not as extreme as that. I take things to extremes, but we do all need to maintain good health and rest from our hard days with good sleep, right? That's not a bad thing. But even in perfection in the Garden of Eden, God set up rest for each of us as a way to enjoy a pause from our physical, our mental, and our emotional burdens, our emotional tiredness. God set it up that way. In the garden, we've heard of, on the seventh day, God rested, but it wasn't for God to rest. It was more for us. It was a time for us to lay aside the emotional duties, the physical duties, the mental duties, and just be alone with Jesus. That is so important. It's so restful. It's needed. Jesus himself saw the need to often withdraw from it all, right? It says in many places in the New Testament that Jesus withdrew and spent some time with the Father. It says he went to an isolated place and just prayed and talked to God. And that's important too. So all this is really important, and we see it in the example of Jesus, so it must be important. The disciples are anticipating this long-awaited rest, just being alone with Jesus. The green pastures, I can see it now, are literally over. They're about to walk up a hill. I see this green hill in my head. And they're walking up the hill. They're ready for this just green pasture with flowers and just everything. It's going to be the most restful situation. And what do they see? A group of people. They see a horde of people. Rollin pointed it out to me that this was over 15 or 20,000 people. Imagine on your day of rest, when you're grouchy, when you're ready for a nap, and you see 15 to 20,000 people that want your attention.
I would pull a Jonah and run the opposite way.
Me too!
Yeah.
Insane. So let's read Mark 6.
And I missed that they hadn't eaten either for days or whatever.
Yes. Isn't that insane? So at that point, it's just I'm done. So Mark 6:33 says, but many people recognized them and saw them leaving, and people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and just like Jesus, not like me, it says he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd, so he began teaching them many things. When we want to have our quiet time, we go and we're about to, and then freaking 15,000, 20,000 people want our attention at the same time. Again, maybe not that extreme, but it feels like that sometimes. Yeah. It really does. These disciples were pretty tight with Jesus. So being tight with Jesus can mean he has the power to tell Jesus hey, this is kind of getting in the way of our rest time. We need some time alone with you. You promised us some food, some rest. Make it happen, Jesus. This is my time with Jesus. I need this time. I'm not going to get fed. I'm hangry. I'm so sleepy. I need this time for myself. What would you do? Would you be on Team Jesus with compassion and care? Or would you be on Team Disciples with sending them away? Just by raise of hands, who would be send them away? Just by natural reaction. All right. And I would be the same way too. And as there's nobody else here, so Team Compassion and Care, action. So you guys know the story, right? So it says, late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat. We all know that part. But verse 37, Jesus said, and this almost seems insensitive, but we'll get there. You feed them. With what? They asked. It says we'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people. So they're thinking of this practically. They're thinking of this with no faith. They're just tired. I got to give them credit here. They just answered honestly, with what? How? How do you expect me to do this? And that's the point. And if I were them, I'd be saying the same thing. How the heck, Jesus? I know you're all powerful. Why can't you do this?
Yeah, I know. It's you're asking me.
Why me?
Yeah.
Why do you want me to get involved with this? Yeah. And they will get involved, let me tell you. But Jesus was totally Team Compassion and Care at this point. But let's look at the example here. So, Julie, if you could put up the next slide. Jesus, the compassion side, never gets peopled out. Can you imagine how many people, he's up in heaven right now. He's on the right hand of the throne of God. And he's interceding for you. He's listening to you. All your prayers, the prayers of every person. Somehow he does it. I don't know how. He never gets peopled out. But then we got the disciples on the other hand. They're humans. They need rest. So I know their need is legitimate here. Their need for rest is legitimate. But the way they're going about it, their vision is almost incomplete. They're seeing things from a human perspective. They're on the send away side, but Jesus sees a deeper need within them, and he sees what they're going through, and he's like, yes, I need to teach these people. I need to show them. I need to keep working here. I need to be busy about my Father's business. Now let's translate that into our own life. So these examples. We can react in anger and say, I don't want anything to do with you. We can react in selfishness to say, I need that time. We can act in compassion. We can say, I'm gonna do this. Or we can be smart about it and get somebody else involved and have them help out. There's many things that we can do. So we don't have to just bear this burden alone, is what I'm saying. So let's think about that in just like in our terms for a second. So have you ever had anybody text you just kind of questions about God, or just questions, maybe an opinion on something? What kind of advice do you give in a moment when you're just tired out? What would you do? It says in John 6:6 that Jesus asked his rational disciple, and I thought of Rollin when I thought of this, Philip, how they're going to make this happen. But then he already knew the answer of what was going to go down. Jesus already knew what was going to go down. He can see ahead of time. But he asks Philip this question, like, how are we going to pay for this? How is this going to happen? How are we going to feed them all? And Philip answers practically. He knew it was impossible. He says, we don't know how this is going to happen. We don't have enough. Like, we got about this much in our bank account, but they're only going to get a little bit. That's something that I love that Rollin said. He said they're only going to get just a little bite. But God didn't want that for the people that were there. He wanted to fill them up completely. And we're going to see how he does it. But I just want to point that out to you. Not only were these people exhausted, was Philip exhausted, but they had nothing to give materially either. Remember, they didn't have any food. After they look at the impossibility, after they see the situation, they weigh it out, Jesus tells them to look again, because there's a small kid in the crowd with something to offer. I titled this part, Look Again, Lazy Bones, because they missed something. They missed this little kid. They missed the most meager but most important offering that they could give, and it's just a little bit. It was just enough. Whatever they could give, really. So in Mark 6, and I'm just going to finish out the chapter here, Jesus asks, how much bread do you have? And he asks, go and find out. And they came back and reported, we have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Then Jesus told his disciples to have the people sit down in groups and on the green grass. And that's how I know it was green, guys, earlier, because it says it here. Those green pastures, like it says in Psalms. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven, and blessed them. No special incantation, nothing crazy like that. He just looks to God and says, get her done, God. And it happens. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so they could distribute it to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted, so they had enough. It wasn't just a small, little, teensy little bit. It was more than enough. And afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. Little personal lunch boxes, as Rollin put it. And a total of 5,000 men and their families were fed from those loaves. Remember that verse in Matthew that we talked about earlier? Talking about, give me your burdens, I will give you rest. That's what he's doing here. Through the work that he's asking his disciples to do, he's actually equipping them in the moment to give them enough energy to go out and serve one more time, to keep going. And that's what God calls us to do as well. To keep going, to keep marching on, to keep serving. He's not telling us, I know you got nothing, but you got to give nothing. He said, give what you have. You have a little bit. You have a little bit of faith. You have a little bit of food. You have a little bit to give. Spend time in my word. Spend time with me. Take that rest. Take that good rest. Get some rest and then go. Don't just be lazy, because a lot of us do that. We're lazy. We don't take the job personally. Serving Jesus is important, and it's the most rewarding job there could ever be. So if we're lazy about it, if we're turning to things of this world like, say, Netflix or distractions in order to find rest, we're not going to find it in those things. Because Jesus gives his disciples a completely new perspective on rest here. And that looks like working. That looks like being energized by the Spirit of God. That looks like being filled with his love, being filled in his presence, seeing what God can do through you when you have nothing, when you have no resources and it seems like you have nothing to give. God shows up. And when God shows up in our lives, that makes me happy. That gives me joy. That gets me more energized. When I pray and sincerely say, God, I don't have enough energy, but I pray tomorrow when I wake up that I would have just enough energy to get done what you would want me to get done. And he comes through every time. I'm so blessed that God does that. So my challenge for you today is, we all got friends. We all have people that might come to us for advice. When you do that, feed them the Word. Be in the Word enough to feed them. Don't feed them garbage, because what the world is feeding them is garbage. What the world says is rest is not rest. It's entertainment. It's garbage. It looks like fish and loaves, but underneath it's literally garbage. They formed it into fish and loaves, but it's nothing compared to what Jesus offers us. So take that time to rest for yourself. Get in God's Word, because then you'll be equipped to go and tell other people how to find rest. And it's only in Jesus. Believe me, the disciples thought that it wasn't. They thought it was going to be found in Jesus feeding them physical food, but it was a spiritual rest that they needed. So that's all I can say today, because that's all I have time for. So I challenge you guys, go out and be rested up in the Lord. Take time with Him. Get that spiritual rest that you need, okay? God, thank you for this time. Just pray that this would go forth powerfully from this room. If anybody's listening online or going to be listening on YouTube, just bless this message in Jesus' name. Amen.